Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my tips for presenting for a conference. If you're new here, my name is Ciara and I'm about 9 months into my PhD program, and I've been sharing my journey, I suppose, along the way, the tips I've learned and different things like that. In the last month of my PhD, I've had to do 4 different presentations. So I've kind of learned a few things and they've all gone particularly well. I'm going to be sharing with you guys what I've learned and what kind of tips I think are really helpful. But I just wanted to give you guys a quick update as well, because I know I haven't been as active on here this month. So if you want to skip this and just go straight into the tips, that's totally fine. I'll have that linked for you below. But for those of you who are a bit interested in what's been going on apart from the presentations, I'm just going to give you a quick update. So if you've seen my last video, you'll know that a friend of mine and myself, we started a startup company as part of a program with my university. So that last video just explains how it works and everything. We still are doing development on it. It's probably going to take a couple of months to get it to the stage where we're really releasing it, but we might do mini releases along the way with some beta users. So if you want to be one of those early users, you can sign up as soon as you can and you might be one of those users. But yeah, so we started this startup company and that was part of a 4-week entrepreneurship program that's run in my university, and we actually managed to come third and got a cash prize of €2,000, which is going towards the startup. So that's been super exciting and very validating to know that there were so many great startup companies in this competition. So to have placed in the top 3, we were very, very thankful and very validated by it in a sense, because we know now that it's something that not only the people we've been talking to about it, but as well, other people feel that it's something that will be a very useful product. That's one thing that was great, but that took up a lot of time because it was a full-time program and I was still working on the PhD full-time. So very busy. I had my first conference, which was online, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But as apart from that, I also at the start of June submitted my second paper on the 1st of June, I think. So that kind of got June off to a pretty hefty start. So that was great. I'm not as confident about that one now as I was with the first one. So this one has a much lower acceptance rate. So whether it gets in or not, I'll let you guys know, and then I can tell you about what to do if things don't get in, because I'm sure it's something that everybody's going to have to face at some point in their PhD, is getting rejected for a conference or a journal. Myself and my supervisor, I co-authored a journal article which we just submitted about a week ago, I think. That was essentially putting together some different case studies. So one of the case studies was my personal work that we've been doing, and some of the other ones were ones that he's done before with other students or things like that. So I was second author on that paper, so if that gets in, that's a great thing to be doing in first year, so feeling pretty good about that, hopefully. We had a summer school as part of my PhD program. That's a week-long event that we have every year that is going to be having some different speakers in, and we all have to give individual presentations about our research. We also had things like a quiz, brainstorming event, things like that, so that happened. What else? I bought an iPad. So for those of you who like my planning videos, I'm going to be doing my next month's planning on this iPad, which I think is going to be really fun, and I think it means I'll be able to share it with you guys a bit easier. So if anyone has, it's done in GoodNotes, so if anyone has that, they should be able to pretty easily take the planning and be able to use it for themselves. But yeah, I'll do a full video about this if you would be interested in seeing why I bought it and how I'm finding it. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see that video. What else did I do this month? I think that's pretty much it. It's been a very busy month, and I'm hoping now things will start to go back to normal a bit, because I've really been missing making these videos, and I know I still posted, I think, one in the middle of the month, so it's 2 weeks, I suppose, waiting for this video, and then after this I'm hoping that it will get back to at least 2 videos a week. So yeah, that is it for my update. Okay, so let's get into these tips. So the conference that I did was the International Conference of Case-Based Reasoning, and at that conference I presented a long paper, which was a 20-minute presentation and 10 minutes of Q&A. I also took part in the doctoral consortium event. What that means is you basically are presenting your research plan to a panel of lecturers or professors from different universities, as well as other PhD students, and you're paired up with a mentor who will look through your slides before the event and give you some advice. And it's just a great way to kind of get your research out there and get some early stage advice. So I do highly recommend. They do take people at any stage, so if you haven't done one and you're in third year, I think it would definitely still be worthwhile to do. Although I think it's more beneficial perhaps in first year when you're actually able to make big changes. If they tell you there's something really wrong with your research, you can make those changes. So obviously your own supervisor is very helpful for these things, but it's great to get some outside advice. Especially for me, case-based reasoning is and will continue to be a very big part of my research. So I think having done the doctoral consortium there is especially beneficial because the people there were very much into case-based reasoning. They all research in that area. So that was also a 20-minute presentation with 10 minutes of Q&A. My supervisor's original advice, I think I originally had maybe 15 slides in the version that I sent to him. So he said that his rule of thumb is typically 1 content slide per minute. So then you typically should have like 25 kind of slides because you'll have some less content slides, I suppose. So that's his rule of thumb. So then I took that on and then I ended up having about 30 slides. And that seems like a lot, but for some of them it was just a quick thing you're talking about, and for other things it was more content that might take a bit more explanation. But the same thing for the doctoral consortium event, I had about 30 slides there too. And I think that helps because if you are going too slowly, if you're keeping a timer, then you can just kind of go through some things a bit quicker and skip over some things that were possibly like additional things. Whereas when you've got less things, it's really hard to kind of ramble on. It's very uncomfortable for people when you're just rambling on trying to make up the time. So you're better off just having more extra slides just in case. One thing that I actually learned from doing the pitching event for our startup was not only to have your slides, but to have some extra slides in case somebody asks you a question that you didn't include in your presentation because of time. Like if you're very constrained on time and you have to cut some things out, there's nothing wrong with having some appendix slides so that you can start screen sharing again once somebody asks you the question to bring up that extra information. So that's something I learned from the pitching event. So from pitching our product. Those are the two things in terms of like the amount of slides. Firstly, 1 content slide per minute, as well as having maybe some backup slides if you know there's some questions that might get asked that you don't necessarily have time to address. Then in terms of what goes on your slides, firstly, how I structured the organization of the talk, I essentially followed the same structure as my paper. So I did a couple of slides introducing the domain. So for us being computer science work related to marathon running, the people in the conference are very much understanding of case-based reasoning. I don't need to provide an introduction to case-based reasoning because the people there understand it, but I do need to provide an introduction to marathon running because that's not something people are necessarily familiar with, especially the things that are particularly relevant for the talk. So the first thing I did was a couple of intro slides for why this work is important in marathon running. So it's a very big sport, millions of people doing it every year, and the number of people doing it every year is increasing every year. And as well, there's tons of people, recreational runners, who don't have access to the same supports that a elite runner might have. And similarly then, it means that there's people looking for this assistance. So that's kind of why it's important. And then moving into the main problems that I also did in the introduction, the 2 main problems we're going to be looking at, which were race time prediction and training plan recommendations. So I provided a brief introduction to those problems, why they're important. And then from there, I started to go into the methodology, which was about how case-based reasoning good to do for this problem. And then also going into the methodology in a bit more detail, how I specifically generated the cases, which is again just a bit of jargon from case-based reasoning, which will be relevant. Like all the people in the conference would have had initial understanding of those things, but trying to just get down to the details of how I actually did it, as well as then how that was translated for each problem that we're working on in the paper. And then once that was established, so now we've established a need for the work, so the domain, we've established the methods, and then the next section to go into was the results. So I briefly explained how the results section worked, so what kind of things we were doing for the prediction problem and what kind of things we were doing for the recommendation problem. And then I just went into the graphs of it, so how that actually turned out, and I explained each graph and like what the general results were. So after those few slides on results, I then just finished up with a concluding slide about, you know, the overall how it went. So, but just to kind of sum things up and the kind of outcome of it, why we think it's beneficial, how it can be worked on in the future, so a bit of future work in there as well, and then just finishing up with a thank you slide. So that's how I've structured it, and that seemed to flow pretty well because if anyone's read the paper, it it should follow along in the same way, which I think it makes things quite clear. And I think for the purpose of a presentation, when you're presenting a paper, I think it makes sense to do it in that way. So having some introductions, some methodology, results and conclusion. Obviously in whatever domain you're working on, it may change a bit, like, because that's typically how our papers would be structured. You might have something a bit different. There might be more of one or the other. There might be a whole other section that I don't necessarily have. So I think just trying to follow loosely the structure of the paper, it just naturally puts things in a good flow, and it's easy then for you to kind of work out how many slides. Doing a few slides for each section of the paper, then you're making sure that you're covering all the bases as well. And then now that we've gone through the structure, in terms of the actual content, so firstly I wanted to talk about pictures. So pictures are a great way to kind of visually add to the canvas and really be able to explain things in less words. I think people tend to be kind of bored with very wordy slides, and my supervisor specifically told me not to do so many words. He literally only let me have a couple of lines on each slide. So pictures are a great way to kind of fill in the blanks, especially if you're talking about a particular domain. So a great website I've found through doing the entrepreneurship course was this website called Pexels. I'll have it linked for you down below, but essentially it's stock images that you have complete access to use. Typically, I think some of them you can pay for, but a lot of them are free, and they're really high quality images that are just so much better than ones you're going to get by looking up on Google Images and, you know, screenshotting or saving them. They're just so much better quality. I actually did a practice presentation, and anytime I've presented to people, everyone said, wow, I really like the pictures. That was one of the feedback I immediately got from people, was those pictures are great. They really suit the topic and they're very high quality and they really just bring you in. That's something that I think really elevates your work. And then the second thing that I kind of already touched on was content. So how much you put in terms of words. My supervisor was very much not keen to have a ton of words on slides, and I usually am the kind of person who I like the slides to be self-contained. I like to be able to look through the slides after an event and be able to completely regain, because I'm not amazing at listening to talks, so sometimes it's good to be able to look back at the slides and gather in everything at a later date. So that was kind of a bit of a difficult thing for me to overcome, was not trying to put a ton of words on the slides. And if I'm being honest now, having been to the conference, there was definitely some other people that had very text heavy slides, and they're just not that great to look at. Like, you should be able to explain things, I think, with less words. You shouldn't be reading off your entire slides. I think it's often better to just have maybe an image and a couple of lines perhaps that explains it if you need real help. But I think it's better to be able to just explain what's going on, and just having those slides there as a visual assistance rather than it being your whole talk is on these slides. So that's just something that I overcame, and I think it actually helped a lot, because during the doctoral consortium event as well, the mentor that I was paired up with, she said that a lot of the time you're spending in the mentorship is fixing the slides because they're ugly, and she said that my slides were perfect and that I didn't need to change them. So that's why I was thankful to have shown them to my supervisor before, so to get that early look and not have to change a ton of things in that mentorship, because it meant that I was actually able to make use of the time more so. So I guess moving on to the third thing with regards to the content, in terms of like themes, I'm not into themes. I like having, for like, especially for something that is being presented in a academic or professional environment, I just think I would rather have something clean and clear. So I like a white background, black text and some images. Those images are the things that should enhance them. I really don't like when there's a ton of different things going on, like transitions. No, I don't like colored backgrounds with white text. Don't like it. And that's also something that I learned in a statistics class. So we had this class that was applied statistical modeling. So what we had to do, they gave us data sets, we worked on them, and then we had to present things, and they were so strict that they did not want any messing about on the slides. It was white background, black text, and you were not to deviate from that or you would have lost marks. But like, to each their own. I think it really depends. For our pitch that we did for Daisier, we did a much more colourful presentation, and I think that's because it's a different environment. You really want to capture people's attention and really make it flashy, whereas for this you want to really let your work speak for itself and not be overcomplicating things with a bunch of different colours and transitions and add-ons that really kind of take away from your work more than anything. So I'd say keep it simple, but also I think it's good to talk to your supervisor about it. So that's pretty much it in terms of like content. So I went through the structure, then as well like what to put in it in terms of pictures, text, and the kind of add-ons. So now I'm just going to talk a bit about like practicing. I do think it's a really good idea to practice your presentation. I was lucky enough because we have my PhD is part of a Centre Research for Training, so we have a research group. I was able to present my first paper, the long paper anyways. I didn't practice the doctoral consortium one as much, but the long paper I was able to present to the research group and get some feedback, and it was definitely helpful because I think when you're presenting your own work, because you're so familiar with it, you kind of forget that people won't have an understanding of things. So it's good to get some feedback if there's anything that's unclear to the audience. It's good to know that before your talk so that you don't get a lot of questions maybe you could have just answered if you had explained things a bit better. So some of the feedback I got was to do with maybe spending a bit more time on certain graphs or explaining a certain concept a bit more clearly and things like that, and that was such helpful feedback to get. So if you have a research group, I highly recommend. If not, I think, you know, presenting to friends or family could also be good, because typically you still want your work to be somewhat understandable to a general audience, even if there might be some things that won't be clear. So even for me presenting to the research group, there was things in case-based reasoning people weren't really familiar with, and I didn't go into much detail on it because that's like the audience I will be presenting to knows all about it. Yeah, it's just about getting some eyes on your work, getting people to hear. It's also good for your own practice, like presenting to practice, make sure that you know what you're going to be saying, because I've heard so many presentations that were obviously not practiced and people didn't time themselves and they just end up rambling, going on for so much longer than they should, not even to like as in going over time, and also just spending too long talking about something when there's a clear natural end to something. So I think it's so important to practice that. You can even like make yourself a script if that makes you more comfortable. For me, making a script doesn't work because I tend to end up sounding very rehearsed, and you might notice that from some of my earlier videos that I would have actually really made a list of things I wanted to talk about and like gone into detail of what I was going to say, and that just makes me end up sounding very rehearsed. Whereas now I'm starting to get more comfortable with presenting from doing all of this YouTube stuff, and that means I'm able to actually just explain things, and hopefully that is a lot better for people, I think, than trying to be like, this is my work. I just think it's kind of not as ideal. So yeah, practicing is a great way to go for that. So with the research group, if you can, with other people, I was able to practice in the research group with my supervisor there, so that was great. Also, because the conference was online, we had to record a video of the presentation before, and because I use a Mac, so in Keynote, for anyone who has to do this as well, in Keynote there's actually a record presentation feature, which is really handy. You can like record the presentation, and then like if you mess up you can go back a little bit and then just record over it, and it's just so handy. I don't know if there's other versions on like non-Macs. I know that one of the things they sent out to us was like how to record in Zoom, so if you make yourself a Zoom meeting just for you, you can obviously then record your presentation that way. But the Keynote feature is really helpful. So even if you can't present your presentation to people in person or in a Zoom meeting, you could just record it and send it around to a few people and ask for their opinion. Obviously, when you're recording it and you're able to fix things, it's not going to be as much the same as it will be when you're doing it for real. So it's good to make sure you practice a few times with strictly like setting your timer and making sure that you have an understanding of, like for me with the 20-minute presentation, I had points in the presentation that I knew 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I should be at this point. And the more you practice, things will start to speed up. So it's okay in the beginning if you're a bit over time, because over time, as you practice, you will start getting faster and it'll just start being more smooth and you will start to go quicker. But you should get yourself to a position where you can do the presentation in the exact time and you'll know 5 minutes I'm on slide X, 10 minutes I'm on slide Y, 15 minutes I'm on slide Z, and then you'll know where you are. In terms of like practicing for the questions. I think it's just good to like try your best to look back at your own recording if you can and think, if I was listening to the first time to this, what questions would I be asking? And obviously as well, when you're sending it around to people or doing it for other people as practice, you can also ask them for questions, as many as they can think of, because that's just a great way to get that feedback. So that's something I think is really helpful, and like not to be too stressed about the questions. Like sometimes you will just get questions that don't make sense to your research. They can throw you off, but you just have to try your best. Presenting is pretty hard, and I think it's something you get better with over time. I definitely think it's something I've improved on so much this year from doing this. So I really think, please try to give yourself a bit of, patience with it. Like it's something you can improve on and you will get there eventually. So if you have a presentation coming up, I hope it goes really well, and I'd love to hear how you get on. Coming up soon in the next couple of days, I will have my July plan with me, and that will be done on an iPad, which will be very interesting, I hope, for everyone. I also will be doing a couple more videos about like what's going on at the moment, what am I doing. I'll probably do like an updated routine video just so you can see how I'm getting on working from home, because I know that's something people are still struggling with a lot. But yeah, thanks so much for listening to this video. If you have any tips for presenting, leave them in the comments down below, because it's still something I'm working on, and I'm sure many of you watching this video will want those tips. So if you have any, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next video.